The wind howled like a wounded animal across the frozen prairie. Jacob Mercer hadn't eaten in 3 days. His horse had collapsed 2 miles back, and now he stumbled through the blizzard, each step a prayer he wasn't sure anyone was listening to. His vision blurred. His legs buckled. This was it. He was going to die out here, alone in the snow, just like he'd lived most of his life. Alone. Then he saw it. A single light flickering in the window of a weathered cabin, like a star fallen to earth. He didn't know that knocking on that door would unravel a mystery 15 years in the making. He didn't know the woman inside was connected to him in ways that would shatter everything he thought he knew about his past. He didn't know that inside that cabin lay a journal, a secret, and a truth that would change 2 lives forever. But fate has a way of bringing 2 broken souls together, especially when they're the only ones who can heal each other. This is the story of how a starving cowboy and a lonely widow found each other in the darkness, and discovered that sometimes the family we've been searching for has been waiting for us all along. The knock came just after midnight, and it nearly stopped Eleanor Hayes's heart. She'd been sitting by the fire, mending one of Thomas's old shirts. She couldn't. Had bring herself to throw them away, even 8 months after burying him. The cabin was silent except for the crackling logs and the relentless wind battering the walls. She hadn't heard another human voice in 6 weeks, not since the last supply. Wagon passed through before winter locked the prairie in its icy grip. At first, she thought she'd imagined it. But then it came again, weak, desperate, barely audible over the storm. Eleanor's hand went to the rifle above the mantel. A woman alone on the frontier learned to be cautious. There were drifters, outlaws, men who'd take advantage of a widow's vulnerability without a second thought. But when she cracked open the door, rifle raised, she found not a threat, but a ghost of a man, tall and gaunt, his face grey with cold, ice-crusted in his dark beard. He was leaning against the doorframe like it was the only thing keeping him upright. His eyes met hers, pale blue like a winter sky, and in them she saw something that made her lower the rifle. Not danger, not malice, just a bone-deep exhaustion and a desperate fading hope. "Please," he whispered, his voice barely more than a rasp. Just one night. I won't trouble you. Just let me die somewhere warm." Those words, "die somewhere warm," they hit Eleanor like a physical blow, because she understood them. She'd felt that way herself, in the dark months after Thomas passed. That bone-tired surrender, that quiet acceptance of the end. She made a decision that would change everything. "You're not dying tonight," she said firmly, and pulled him inside. The man collapsed the moment he crossed the threshold, his body giving out completely. Eleanor caught him as best she could, struggling under his weight as she dragged him toward the fire. He was burning with fever despite the cold, his clothes soaked through with snow and sweat. She worked through the night, like a woman possessed. She stripped off his frozen clothes, wrapped him in every blanket she owned, and forced warm broth between his cracked lips. She bathed his face with cool water when the fever spiked, and piled more wood on the fire when he shook with chills. It reminded her of nursing Thomas through his final illness. The helplessness, the desperate hope, the fear of losing someone to forces beyond her control. But Thomas had slipped away despite everything she'd done. This stranger she was determined to save. Dawn came grey and cold. The man still lived, but barely. His breathing was shallow, his skin pale as parchment. Eleanor sat beside him, exhausted, and found herself praying for the first time since Thomas died. "Don't you dare give up," she whispered to the unconscious stranger. "I didn't pull you from death's door just to have you walk through it anyway." For 2 days, Jacob Mercer drifted in a fevered twilight between life and death. He saw faces from his past, his mother, singing a lullaby he'd almost forgotten, his father, teaching him to rope cattle, and Samuel, his older brother, the last time he'd seen him, a boy of 16 being led away by strangers, while 8-year-old Jacob screamed and fought against the hands holding him back. "I'll find you," Samuel had shouted. "I promise, Jacob, I'll come back for you." But he never had. On the 3rd morning, Jacob's eyes opened clear for the first time. The fever had broken. He found himself in a small, tidy cabin, wrapped in quilts, with a fire crackling nearby. And sitting in a rocking chair across the room, watching him with cautious eyes, was a woman. She was perhaps 35, with dark hair pulled back in a simple bun, and a face that might have been beautiful if it wasn't so marked by sorrow. But her eyes, brown and deep, held a strength that reminded Jacob of the prairie itself, weathered but unbroken. "You're awake," she said, and there was relief in her voice. "I was starting to wonder if you'd ever come back to us." Jacob's throat was dry as dust. "Water," he managed. She brought him a cup, helping him sit up enough to drink. The water was the best thing he'd ever tasted. "How long?" he asked. "3 days. You've been burning with fever." She sat back down, maintaining a careful distance. "I'm Eleanor Hayes. This is my land, my cabin. And you are?" "Jacob Mercer, ma'am." He looked around, taking in the simple but well-kept space. "And I owe you my life." "You don't owe me anything," Eleanor said. But her voice was softer now. "But you can't travel yet. The storm's still raging, and you're weak as a newborn calf. You'll stay until you're strong enough to leave." Jacob nodded, too exhausted to argue. "Thank you, Mrs. Hayes. It's just Eleanor. Mrs. Hayes was my mother-in-law, and we didn't get along." A ghost of a smile crossed her face. "Rest now. We'll talk when you're stronger." But as she turned away, Jacob spoke again. "Why'd you help me? A strange man at your door in the middle of the night. You could have turned me away. Should have, probably." Eleanor paused, her back to him. When she spoke, her voice was quiet. "Because I know what it's like to feel alone in the dark, and I wouldn't wish that on anyone." The storm raged for another week, and in that time, the cabin became a world unto itself, a small island of warmth and light in an ocean of snow and wind. Jacob recovered slowly. Eleanor fed him stews and bread, and gradually the color returned to his face, the strength to his limbs. He insisted on helping where he could, splitting wood, mending a broken chair, fixing a window shutter that had come loose. "You don't have to earn your keep," Eleanor told him. "I know," Jacob replied, "but I need to feel useful. Been drifting too long, feeling like I don't belong anywhere." In the evenings, they sat by the fire, and slowly, carefully, they began to share their stories. Jacob told her about growing up in Missouri, the youngest of 2 boys. Their parents had run a small farm until cholera swept through the county when Jacob was 8. Both parents died within days of each other. "Samuel and I, we had no other family," Jacob said, staring into the flames. "The county split us up, said it was easier to place 1 boy than 2. Samuel was 16, almost a man. They sent him to work for a rancher up north. I got sent to a family in town, the Mercers. They were good people, gave me their name, raised me right." "But you never forgot your brother," Eleanor said softly. "Never. Samuel promised he'd come back for me when he got established, when he had money saved. I waited." Jacob's voice grew rough. "I waited years. When I turned 18, I started searching for him. Spent every spare dollar, followed every lead, traveled from Missouri to Texas to Colorado and back again. Did you ever find him?" Jacob's jaw tightened. "Last year, I finally tracked down the ranch where he'd been sent. The owner remembered him, said Samuel had worked there for 2 years, saved his money, then headed west to make his fortune. Said he was a good worker, quiet, kept to himself." He paused. "Then I found a newspaper article from 15 years ago. A fire in a settlement in Wyoming. Several people killed, including a man named Samuel Mercer." Eleanor's hand went to her mouth. "Oh, Jacob. 15 years I'd been looking for him, and he'd been dead the whole time. I'd missed him by years." Jacob's voice cracked. "I never got to tell him I never stopped waiting. Never got to tell him I understood why he couldn't come back, that I didn't blame him." Silence fell between them, heavy with shared grief. After a long moment, Eleanor spoke. "My husband Thomas died 8 months ago. Fever took him, same as took your parents. He was 43 years old, and we'd been married 12 years. "I'm sorry," Jacob said. "He was a good man, steady, hard-working, kind. But..." Eleanor hesitated, choosing her words carefully. There was a part of him I could never reach, like he was carrying a weight I couldn't see, a sorrow he wouldn't share. Sometimes I'd catch him staring out at the horizon with the saddest look in his eyes, and when I'd ask what he was thinking about, he'd just smile and say, "Nothing important." "Maybe he was trying to protect you," Jacob offered. "Maybe. Or maybe he didn't trust me enough to share his pain." Eleanor stood and walked to a small wooden chest in the corner of the room. "After he died, I was going through his things, and I found this hidden under a loose floorboard." She pulled out a worn leather journal, its cover cracked with age. Thomas kept a journal, for years apparently, and he never told me. She held it like it was something precious and dangerous all at once. "I've been reading it, trying to understand the man I married, and I've learned more about him in these pages than I did in 12 years of marriage." Jacob watched as she sat back down, the journal in her lap. "What did you learn?" Eleanor opened the book, her fingers tracing the faded ink. "That Thomas had a whole life before me, a wife named Mary and a baby daughter named Rose. They died in a house fire when Thomas was 25. He barely escaped himself." "God," Jacob breathed. "He lost everything." "Yes, and he blamed himself. He wrote that he'd been out drinking with friends when it happened, that if he'd been home, he might have saved them." Eleanor's voice trembled. "He carried that guilt for 18 years. Every day of our marriage, he was haunted by them." "But he found happiness with you, didn't he?" Jacob asked. "He must have, or he wouldn't have married you." "I think he tried. But there's something else in this journal, Jacob. Something that haunted him even more than losing his wife and child." She looked up, her eyes glistening. "He wrote about a brother. A younger brother he'd been forced to leave behind when he was 16 years old." Jacob went very still. Eleanor continued, reading from the journal. "Today marks 27 years since I last saw my little brother Jacob. I was 16, he was 8. They tore us apart after Mama and Papa died, and I've never forgiven myself for not fighting harder to keep us together. I promised him I'd come back, but by the time I had money saved, I'd lost track of where they'd sent him. I've searched, but it's like he vanished. Sometimes I wonder if he's even alive. Sometimes I hope he's not, because at least then he wouldn't remember me as the brother who abandoned him." The room seemed to spin around Jacob. His heart hammered against his ribs. "What?" His voice came out strangled. "What was your husband's full name?" Eleanor looked confused by the question. "Thomas Samuel Hayes." "Why?" "Samuel was his middle name." "Yes, but what was his birth name?" "Before he took the name Hayes." Eleanor flipped back through the journal, her hands starting to shake. "He wrote it here somewhere. Here. He said he took his wife's family name after they married, wanted a fresh start. His birth name was—" Her voice trailed off as she read the words. Her face went white. "Thomas Samuel Mercer." The journal slipped from her hands and hit the floor. Jacob stood abruptly, his chair clattering backward. He couldn't breathe, couldn't think. The room was too small, the walls closing in. "That's not possible," he said, but even as he spoke, he knew it was. The pieces were falling into place with horrible, perfect clarity. "Jacob," Eleanor started. "My brother's full name was Samuel Thomas Mercer," Jacob said, his voice shaking. "We had the same middle name, Thomas, after our father. We used to joke about it, said we were connected by more than blood." Eleanor picked up the journal with trembling hands, flipping through it frantically. "How old are you, Jacob?" 33. Thomas would have been 43 if he'd lived. She did the math. "That's 8 years older. The same age difference he wrote about." She found a page near the back of the journal and gasped. There, sketched in fading ink, was a drawing. 2 boys standing in front of a small farmhouse. One was tall and gangly, maybe 16, with serious eyes. The other was small, no more than 8, grinning up at his older brother. Beneath the drawing, in Thomas's careful handwriting, "Jacob and me, the summer before everything changed. I'm sorry I couldn't find you, little brother. I never stopped looking. I hope wherever you are, you're happy. I hope you don't hate me for leaving you behind." Jacob sank to his knees, a sound escaping his throat that was half sob, half laugh. "That's us. That's me and Samuel. Eleanor knelt beside him, tears streaming down her face. "Jacob, I think my husband was your brother. But the newspaper said he died in a fire 15 years ago," Jacob said desperately, clinging to the last thread of doubt. "The fire that killed his wife and daughter. It was 15 years ago," Eleanor whispered. "Thomas survived it. But maybe whoever reported it got the names wrong. Or maybe Thomas was listed among the dead by mistake. It happens in tragedies like that." Jacob grabbed the journal, his hands shaking so badly he could barely turn the pages. He read his brother's words written to him, about him, mourning him. "I wonder if Jacob remembers Mama's songs. I wonder if he thinks about me. Does he know I tried to find him? Does he know I never stopped loving him? I saw a boy today who looked like Jacob might look now, dark hair, blue eyes, tall and strong. For a moment my heart stopped, but it wasn't him. It's never him. Eleanor asked me today why I sometimes seem sad. I wanted to tell her about Jacob, about the brother I lost, the promise I broke. But how do I explain that I've been searching for a ghost? That half my heart has been missing for 25 years. Page after page, year after year, Samuel had written about his little brother, about the guilt, the grief, the endless, fruitless searching. And Jacob had been doing the same thing, just a few hundred miles away, always one step behind, one lead too late. "I was looking for him," Jacob said, his voice breaking. "All those years I was looking for him, and he was looking for me, and we never—" He couldn't finish. Eleanor wrapped her arms around him as he wept, deep, wrenching sobs that seemed to come from the very core of him. She cried, too, for the husband she'd never fully known, for the brothers who'd spent their lives searching, for each other, for the cruel twist of fate that had brought them together only after it was too late. "He loved you," Eleanor said through her tears. "Jacob, he loved you so much. Every page of this journal, he never forgot you. You were in his heart every single day. But I never got to tell him," Jacob choked out. "I never got to tell him I didn't blame him, that I understood, that I loved him too. I was so close, Eleanor. I was in Wyoming 2 years ago, just 2 years after he left. If I'd just been faster, if I'd just—" "You can't think like that," Eleanor said firmly, pulling back to look him in the eyes. "You'll drive yourself mad with what-ifs. I've been doing it for 8 months. What if I'd called the doctor sooner? What if I'd noticed the fever earlier? What if? It doesn't change anything. It just makes the pain worse." Jacob nodded, but the anguish in his eyes didn't fade. "I spent 15 years looking for him, and I found him 6 months too late." "No," Eleanor said softly. "You found him, Jacob. Maybe not the way you wanted, but you found him. He's here, in these pages. His words, his thoughts, his love for you. It's all here. And now you know the truth. He never abandoned you. He never stopped searching. He never stopped loving you." She pressed the journal into his hands. "This is his gift to you. His way of telling you everything he never got to say in person." The days that followed were strange and sacred. Jacob and Eleanor moved through the cabin like two people in a dream, bound together by grief and revelation. They read Thomas's journal together, cover to cover. Eleanor learned about the husband she'd never fully known, his childhood, his dreams, his regrets. Jacob learned about the man his brother had become, strong, kind, haunted, but still searching for redemption. "Listen to this," Eleanor said one evening, reading aloud. "Eleanor is the best thing that ever happened to me. She doesn't know it, but she saved my life. After Mary and Rose died, I wanted to die too. I was drinking myself to death, picking fights, hoping someone would put me out of my misery. Then I met Eleanor, and she looked at me like I was worth something, like I could be more than my mistakes. I married her because I loved her, but also because I hoped that loving her might make me worthy of being loved back." Eleanor's voice broke. "I never knew. He never told me any of this." Jacob reached over and squeezed her hand. "He was protecting you, didn't want to burden you with his past. But I was his wife. I should have known. I could have helped him carry it. Maybe he thought the best way to love you was to give you a fresh start, free from his ghosts." Jacob paused. "Samuel, Thomas, he was always like that, even as a kid. Always trying to protect me, take care of me. I remember once, I broke a window playing ball, and he told our PA it was him who did it. Took the whipping for me. Eleanor smiled through her tears. That sounds like Thomas. They found other treasures in the journal too, sketches of the farm, where they'd grown up, recipes their mother used to make, songs she'd sung. Jacob hadn't thought about those songs in 25 years, but seeing the words written in his brother's hand brought them flooding back. One night, as they sat by the fire, Jacob began to sing one of them, a lullaby about a mockingbird. His voice was rough and unpracticed, but the melody was there, buried deep in his memory. Eleanor closed her eyes and listened. "Thomas used to hum that," she whispered. "I never knew what it was, but sometimes, when he thought I was asleep, I'd hear him humming it. Now I know. He was remembering your mother, remembering you." The winter slowly began to loosen its grip. The storms came less frequently, and on clear days they could see the sun glinting off the snow. Jacob grew stronger, and he threw himself into work around the cabin, repairing the barn, mending fences, chopping enough wood to last Eleanor through the next winter. "You don't have to do all this," Eleanor protested. "I know," Jacob said, "but Samuel would want me to. He'd want to know you were taken care of." Eleanor watched him work, this man who was a stranger a month ago, and now felt like family. Because he was family, in a way. He was her husband's brother. That made him, what? Her brother-in-law? It seemed too simple a term for the bond they'd formed. One afternoon, as Jacob was fixing a section of the barn roof, Eleanor climbed up the ladder to bring him water. "Can I ask you something?" she said. "Of course. What will you do when spring comes and you can travel again?" Jacob paused, hammer in hand. It was a question he'd been avoiding. "I don't know. I've spent so long searching for Samuel, I never thought about what I'd do if... when..." He trailed off. "You could stay," Eleanor said quietly, "if you wanted. There's plenty of work here, and I could use the help. And..." She hesitated. "And I think Thomas would want you to. I think he'd want to know we were looking after each other." Jacob looked at her, really looked at her. In the sunlight, with the wind stirring her hair, she looked younger, less burdened. The sorrow that had marked her face when they first met had eased, replaced by something softer. "I'd like that," he said. "I'd like that a lot." But even as he said it, he felt a flicker of something he didn't want to examine too closely. Because Eleanor wasn't just his brother's widow anymore. She was becoming something more, a friend, a confidant, someone he looked forward to seeing each morning and hated to say goodnight to each evening. And that felt dangerous, wrong even. She was Samuel's wife, his brother's widow. There were lines that shouldn't be crossed. But fate, it seemed, had other plans. Spring arrived in earnest in late March, transforming the prairie from a white wasteland into an ocean of green grass and wildflowers. The cabin, which had felt like a sanctuary during the winter, now felt almost too small for the emotions growing within its walls. Jacob had stayed, as Eleanor had asked. He'd moved into the small barn, giving them both space and propriety. He worked the land from dawn to dusk, and Eleanor cooked and mended and kept the house. To any outsider, they might have looked like brother and sister or business partners, but the truth was more complicated. Jacob found himself watching Eleanor when she didn't know he was looking, the way she hummed while she worked, the way she smiled when the first flowers bloomed, the way her eyes lit up when she laughed. And he felt guilty for every moment of it, because she was Samuel's wife, and Samuel was barely cold in his grave. Eleanor felt it too. The way her heart lifted when Jacob came in from the fields, the way she found excuses to bring him water or food, the way she'd started wearing her hair down instead of in its usual severe bun. And she felt ashamed because Thomas had been a good husband and she was betraying his memory by having these feelings for his brother. They didn't speak of it. They maintained a careful distance, a polite formality that fooled no one, least of all themselves. Then, one evening in early April, Eleanor found something in Thomas's journal that changed everything. She'd read the journal cover to cover 3 times already, but this time she noticed something she'd missed before, a page that seemed thicker than the others, as if something had been glued to it. Carefully, she peeled it open and found a folded letter tucked inside. The letter was addressed to Jacob, With shaking hands, Eleanor unfolded it. It was dated just 2 weeks before Thomas died. Dear Jacob, I'm writing this letter knowing I may never have the courage to send it, and you may never have the chance to read it. But I need to put these words down, need to say what I've kept locked in my heart for 25 years. I'm sorry. I'm sorry I couldn't keep my promise to come back for you. I'm sorry I wasn't strong enough, smart enough, fast enough to find you. I'm sorry you spent your life thinking I'd abandoned you, because I know that's what you must have thought. How could you think anything else? The truth is, I never stopped looking. Every town I passed through, I asked about you. Every stranger I met, I wondered if they'd seen you. I hired investigators when I had money, followed leads when I didn't, but you were like smoke, always just out of reach. 5 years ago, I finally accepted that I might never find you, and that acceptance nearly killed me. I started drinking again, started taking risks, hoping maybe I'd just not wake up one morning. But Eleanor saved me. She gave me a reason to keep living, even if I couldn't find you. I want you to know that if you're reading this, if by some miracle you have found your way to Eleanor, then fate has done what I couldn't, and I want you to know that I release you from any obligation you might feel toward me. Live, Jacob. Be happy. Don't spend your life mourning me the way I spent mine mourning you. And if you find comfort with Eleanor, if you find love with her, then I give you my blessing. She deserves happiness, and so do you. Don't let my ghost stand in the way of that. You were the best brother a man could ask for. I'm sorry I wasn't the same for you. With all my love, Samuel. Eleanor read the letter 3 times, tears streaming down her face. Then she stood, walked out to the barn where Jacob was bedding down for the night, and handed it to him without a word. Jacob read it by lamplight, and with each word, something inside him broke open and healed at the same time. He knew, Jacob whispered. Somehow, he knew, he hoped. Eleanor corrected gently. He hoped that somehow, someday, you'd find your way here. And he wanted you to know it was okay, that he wasn't angry, that he wanted you to be happy. Jacob looked up at her, and in his eyes, Eleanor saw everything he'd been, holding back. The longing, the guilt, the love he was afraid to name. Eleanor, he said, his voice rough, I can't stop thinking about you, and I hate myself for it, because you're Samuel's wife, and he's only been gone 8 months, and I have no right. Stop, Eleanor said, kneeling beside him. Jacob, I've been feeling the same way, and I've been just as ashamed. But Thomas, Samuel, he's giving us permission. He's telling us it's okay. But is it? Jacob asked desperately. Is it okay to love my brother's widow? Is it okay to be happy when he's dead? Eleanor took his face in her hands. Your brother spent his whole life carrying guilt and grief. He lost his family, he lost you, and he never forgave himself for any of it. Do you want to do the same thing? Do you want to spend the rest of your life punishing yourself for feeling something good? No, Jacob admitted. But I don't know how to let myself be happy when he never got the chance. Then let's be happy for him, Eleanor said. Let's live the life he wanted for us. Let's honor his memory by not making the same mistakes he did, by not letting fear and guilt steal our joy. Jacob pulled her into his arms, and for the first time since he'd learned the truth, he let himself feel it, the love, the hope, the possibility of a future. I don't want to rush this, he said. I don't want people to think. I don't care what people think, Eleanor said fiercely. But we'll take our time. We'll do this right. We'll honor Thomas's memory and build something new, something that's ours. Jacob nodded, and they sat there in the barn, holding each other as the spring night settled around them. They courted properly, the way people did on the frontier, with long walks across the prairie, with shared meals and quiet conversations, with a growing intimacy that was both thrilling and terrifying. Jacob told Eleanor stories about Samuel as a boy, how he'd taught Jacob to fish, how he'd defended him from bullies, how he'd always saved the best piece of meat for his little brother at dinner. Eleanor told Jacob stories about Thomas as a man, how he'd proposed to her under a full moon, how he'd built this cabin with his own hands, how he'd held her when she miscarried their only child and told her they'd be okay, that they had each other. They wept together for the man they'd both loved and lost. And slowly, carefully, they began to build something new from the ashes of their grief. The neighbors noticed, of course. In a frontier community, nothing stayed secret for long. Some whispered that it was too soon, that Eleanor should observe a proper mourning period. Others said it was practical. A widow needed a man to help work the land, and Jacob needed a home. But a few, the ones who'd known Thomas best, saw something else. They saw the way Jacob and Eleanor looked at each other, and they recognized it as something rare and precious. They saw two people who'd been broken by loss finding a way to be whole again. One Sunday after church, old Mrs. Patterson pulled Eleanor aside. "I knew your Thomas," she said. "Knew him before you did, when he first came to this territory. He was a haunted man, carrying more pain than any one person should have to bear." "I know," Eleanor said quietly. "But you brought him peace," Mrs. Patterson continued. "In the years he was with you, I saw him smile more than I'd seen in all the years before. You gave him a reason to live." She patted Eleanor's hand. "And now you've given his brother the same gift. Thomas would be proud of you, dear. Don't let anyone tell you different." Eleanor hugged the old woman, grateful for the blessing. As summer arrived, Jacob and Eleanor fell into a rhythm that felt like it had always existed. They worked the land together, planted a garden that would have made Thomas proud, and in the evenings they sat on the porch and watched the sun set over the prairie. One evening in late June, as the sky turned gold and pink, Jacob reached over and took Eleanor's hand. "I want to marry you," he said simply. "Not because it's practical, not because people expect it, but because I love you. Because you've become the most important person in my world. Because when I think about the future, I can't imagine it without you." Eleanor's eyes filled with tears. "I love you too, Jacob. I think I started falling in love with you that first night, when you were half dead on my doorstep and still said, 'Thank you.' And I think Thomas knew. I think somehow he brought you here, not just so you'd know the truth about him, but so we'd find each other." "Do you really think that?" Jacob asked. "I do. I think your brother loved us both enough to give us this gift, each other." They married in August, a simple ceremony in the same church where Eleanor had married Thomas 12 years before. Eleanor wore a dress of pale blue, and Jacob wore his best shirt, and when the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, it felt like a beginning and an ending all at once. That night, as they lay together in the cabin that had once been Eleanor and Thomas, and was now Eleanor and Jacob's, Jacob whispered, "Thank you, Samuel. Thank you for leading me here. Thank you for her." And Eleanor added, "Thank you, Thomas. Thank you for loving us enough to let us love each other." The wind whispered through the prairie grass outside, and for just a moment, it sounded almost like a voice, a blessing, a benediction, a brother's final gift. 5 years passed. The cabin grew. Jacob added 2 rooms, one for the son they named Thomas Samuel, and one for the daughter they named Rosemary, after the family they'd both lost. Jacob never stopped talking to his children about their Uncle Thomas, the man they'd never meet, but who'd brought their parents together. He told them stories about Samuel as a boy, and Eleanor told them stories about Thomas as a man. And the children grew up knowing they were part of a love story that transcended death itself. On the anniversary of Thomas's death each year, the family would visit his grave. Jacob would place wildflowers on the headstone and say, "I found you, brother. I finally found you, and I promise I'm taking care of her, just like you wanted." And Eleanor would add, "We're happy, Thomas. We're so happy. Thank you for bringing him to me." The children would stand quietly, holding their parents' hands, and though they didn't fully understand, they felt the weight of the moment. The love, the loss, the strange and beautiful way their family had been formed. One evening, when Thomas Samuel was 7, and Rosemary was 5, young Thomas asked, "Papa, do you think Uncle Thomas is watching us from heaven?" Jacob looked at Eleanor, and they shared a smile. "I think he is, son," Jacob said. "I think he's watching, and I think he's proud. Proud of your mama for being so strong. Proud of me for finally finding my way home. And proud of you and your sister for being exactly who you are." "Do you miss him?" Rosemary asked. Every day, Eleanor said, honestly. But I'm grateful too. Grateful for the time I had with him, and grateful that he loved us enough to bring your papa into our lives. That night, after the children were asleep, Jacob and Eleanor sat on the porch, watching the stars emerge one by one. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you hadn't opened the door that night? Jacob asked. Every day, Eleanor admitted. I almost didn't, you know. I was scared, but something told me to open it, and I'm so glad I listened. Me too, Jacob said, pulling her close. I was looking for my brother for 15 years, and I found him. But I also found you and our children and this life, and I think that's what Samuel wanted all along. He wanted me to stop searching for the past and start building a future. He wanted us both to be happy, Eleanor said. And we are. Against all odds, despite all the pain, we are. They sat in comfortable silence, two souls who'd been lost and lonely, now found in each other. The prairie wind whispered through the grass, carrying with it the scent of wildflowers and the promise of tomorrow. And somewhere, in the space between earth and sky, two brothers were finally at peace, one resting in the ground, one living on the land, both knowing that love, in the end, was stronger than death, stronger than time, stronger than all the miles and years that had tried to keep them apart. The starving cowboy had knocked on a lonely widow's door, and in doing so had found not just shelter, but redemption. Not just his brother, but himself. Not just a past, but a future. And that, in the end, was the greatest gift of all.